Hey, what is up everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today as we're sitting down talking about the 2008 Royal Rumble. Sat down today, wanted to watch some wrestling action, didn't really know what was out there that I wanted to watch. So I said, hey, why don't we go down and check out some of the Royal Rumbles that I've never had a chance to really go back and look at. The first one that came to mind would be Royal Rumble 2008. This, of course, would be the return of John Cena. And I'm not going to go out there and throw out the spoiler alert. This pay-per-view happened so many years ago. I think everyone should know this is the Royal Rumble. The John Cena had the magical, mysterious return so many times in the history of wrestling as being a wrestling fan. With listening to Dave Meltzer on Wrestling Observer, from reading the Observer, from reading various news sites. Very rarely do real surprises really happen in wrestling. And let me tell you here today that this surprise in 2008 was honestly one of the biggest surprise returns that I've ever seen in my lifetime as being a wrestling fan. John Cena had gone down with an injury, I believe, the summer before, wrestling a match against Batista at SummerSlam, and then they told the story that he was injured on Monday Night Raw in a match against Mr. Kennedy. I'm not quite sure if that was because, Batista and him were, both baby faces at the time, and they wanted to heal to sort of get the rub from the injury, whatnot. But, this was a big deal. And John Cena, who was the number one guy in the company, you still had guys like The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, but the guy driving the bus down the road was, even at that time, John Cena, the number one superstar in the company. And for him to be gone due to injury, this was a big hit for the company. And I'm not sure they were, yelling out, and setting the place on fire, saying, we don't know what we're going to do. But it was a big shock for the number one guy in the company to be injured. A lot of people were saying that Cena would be lucky if he'd be ready to return for WrestleMania. Some people were even saying that he would return after WrestleMania. It reminds me a lot, like on the chase to WrestleMania, when we were all hoping for a Finn Balor return and ended up not getting it, and him coming out the night after on Monday Night Raw, sort of having that new push to the next year's Royal Rumble instead of just putting him out there and just putting him in a match just to have him, or have him do the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. This was a really, really good Royal Rumble. I really like this from start to finish. The 2008 Royal Rumble beginning has a very good rub of the 2007 Royal Rumble. This one starts with competitors number 1 and number 2 being Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. Both of these guys spent a long time in the Rumble, going about 30 minutes, both being eliminated, honestly, at the same time. But this plays back on the 2007 Royal Rumble, which honestly came down to Undertaker and Shawn Michaels as the last two competitors being in the ring. And, it sort of sets pace for what's going to be going down for them having their match at WrestleMania 25, which leads to them having the retirement match at WrestleMania 26. Really, really good stuff, because they get in there, Undertaker squares up, and he's, trying to throw his punches. Michaels knows that he's got a jab and uses speed to be able to stick it out there with them. After the 90 seconds, number 3 comes off and ends up being a comedian, Santino Marella, who comes down and ends up getting the Sweet Chin music. And then Undertaker just picks him up and tosses him over the top rope. He spends about 25 seconds in the Royal Rumble. Michaels and Undertaker go right back to fighting till the bell goes off, and this ends up being the Great Khali, who ends up having to duck just to enter into the arena, not be able to just walk through the Madison Square Garden entranceway. This was a Royal Rumble that had one of the really cool entranceways, because of the fact they were in the garden. They used the short ramp, which a lot of people like, and it's one of the ways that you can really tell that it's a garden show. Great Khali comes in with great impact into the match. He only spends about a minute in it before being eliminated by The Undertaker. But you can really tell that this guy, even though he only spends a minute, is getting a big push and is one of the guys that had a chance to win it. From there, this is when the ring starts to sort of fill up with guys. We see entrants Hardcore Holly, John Morrison, Tommy Dreamer, before being met by Batista at number 8. Batista comes in, he gets 4 eliminations over his time in the show. He is one of the highlighted guys who ends up being in the Final 4 at the end. But Batista is one of the... he's joined in the ring with Undertaker and with Michaels, but those two guys are honestly, because of the fact they drew number 1 and number 2, are pretty much looked at as like underdogs in this match, and Batista becomes sort of like your first favorites to really win this. From here, we start to see the ring fill up with a lot of guys that are just coming in to get their minute of fame. We have Hornswoggle, who comes in, but he ends up never getting eliminated from the match. He just ends up spinning it underneath the ring, and a lot like Curtis Axel a few years ago, putting on the thing that the Royal Rumble match never ended because he had never been eliminated. Hornswoggle still has right over the 2008 Rumble that, he should be looked at as one of the crown winners, because at one point he does, I believe, reach up from underneath the ring, helping Miz get eliminated, but never comes back out after that moment. We see Chuck Palumbo, Jamie Noble, CM Punk, who they bring up the fact that qualified for the Royal Rumble on the very last night at a house show before the Royal Rumble. This year was pretty fun because of the fact that they held matches on house shows where you had to keep track on WWE.com. They had matches on Raw, they had matches on SmackDown, and not every single person that was in this match had to qualify, but they were holding qualifying matches a lot from here. From there we go to Cody Rhodes, Umaga, Snitsky, The Miz, Shelton Benjamin. Shelton Benjamin has a really cool spot in this match. He's eliminated before his entrance theme even has a chance to end, but he runs down to the ring and then immediately sprints where he jumps up on the second turnbuckle where Miz and Morrison are fighting on the top turnbuckle, and basically gives them giant headbutts. Neither one falls out of the ring. Both of them fall down to the apron. But when Benjamin comes down off doing this spot, he's Sweet Chin Music by Shawn Michaels right over the top rope. From here we go to one of the cool spots of the 2008 Rumble. Jimmy Snuka as well as Roddy Piper come out at number 18 and number 19 in the legend spots. Basically, Snuka comes down to get the giant pop and he sort of fights around for a minute, but when Piper comes down, the whole ring just shuts down. It reminds me a lot of when the guys were beating up the guy Pewter from Tough Enough, and basically the whole thing just stopped. And then also in that same Rumble, I believe, is when son of a gun, his name just escaped me. But basically, the whole Royal Rumble stopped to beat up the guy that's not Tiger Ali Singh, not he's gonna kill me, and that's gonna make this review suck. But I think some people will know. Where just basically everybody beat up the Jinder Mahal lookalike for a minute and threw him out. One thing that I liked about the Rumble that took place between Snuka and Piper in here, that if you look through them fighting and you look at CM Punk, a lot of people have said a lot of things about CM Punk, including me, since he walked away from wrestling. But you can watch Piper and Snuka fight, and you can see in his eyes and you can see in his smile that the guy really is a wrestling fan. From here we go to Kane, Carlito, Mick Foley, Mr. Kennedy, Big Daddy V, Mark Henry, Chavo Guerrero, Finley, all coming down. Number 28 ends up being Elijah Burke, a guy that I can honestly tell you that I didn't even remember being in WWE. I remember him as the Pope wrestling in TNA, but I guess he did have his moment there in ECW, and I honestly remember liking him. I can't remember what his partner's name. It was like Sylvester Turkai or something like that. I don't even know where that guy went, but Elijah Burke I thought was the guy that with a lot of potential that never really got to show it. From there we're joined at number 29, Triple H, who comes running down to a huge pop, and a lot of people are thinking this is the guy who's going to win the Rumble, sort of repeating what he had done back in 2002, only for the pure shock of number 30 when John Cena came down. It ends up being the final four of Kane, Batista, Triple H, and John Cena, but immediately Kane is eliminated, basically making this a three-way between Triple H, Cena, and Batista. Batista starts it off by doing his whole thumbs up, which turns into the thumbs down. Cena immediately comes over and does the "you can't see me," and then Triple H hits them both with some suckets. It's almost like, a face-off in the video game where you're hitting the taunt button and you're trying to build up your momentum before you start fighting. But they immediately start going into it. Batista's the first to be eliminated, and then John Cena gets Triple H DFU over the top rope to win it all. I was really surprised by this. Honestly, I used to listen to a wrestling podcast, which was not... I remember that it was in the UK, and a lot of times guys would only go on there when they were there, and that's why it wasn't a weekly or even a monthly podcast. It was just sort of like you would open up your iTunes and then boom, the show downloaded. I'm not sure if they're still on there. I don't even know if I can find it. Hogan. But it was a really cool show, and I remember that Cena went over there. I'm not sure if he was promoting the Marine or what he was really promoting, but he was on the show, and you can honestly hear at the end of the interview, when they're trying to wrap it up, Cena asks him, "Is there anything else you want to know?" But because of the fact that everybody had thought that Cena was going to be coming back for WrestleMania, maybe coming back after WrestleMania, that there was no chance in the world that he was coming back. And he ended up being a repeat guest, and he would come back, and he honestly remembered the interview. And he was hoping that they were not going to ask him about his return or about the Royal Rumble, because he said at that time that he would have told the truth, and he would have spoiled the whole thing. And that's just the beauty of John Cena and everything like that. But this was a really, really good Rumble. I'm surprised it took me so long to go back and watch this show. But I hope you guys fire this up on the WWE Network, because not only for the Cena return, there's a lot of action in there. Michaels and Undertaker, fighting back and forth. That this is a really, really good show to check out on the WWE Network. I'm flipping through trying to find what the name of that dang wrestling podcast was out of the UK, but it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to find it by the end of the video. But I'm sure if you send me a tweet and ask me if I can remember, by that time I would have looked it up, and I'll let you know. So at Stevie Breach Me, and I'll give you the link to the podcast. They haven't put one up in a while. I heard that the podcast ended up actually being turned into a television show, so it might have just ended. But sometimes podcasts will live through the eternity of time on iTunes, and sometimes when a show's over, for one reason or another, if they lose their server or something like that, they ended up just getting pulled down, and you never get to hear them again. One of my favorite shows that was out there was from Dave Lagana, who at the time was not with TNA, and he left WWE, and he talked to a lot of the people that were writers on the WWE staff, and they would just talk about what was going on in wrestling or what was going on back in the day in wrestling. And that's one that honestly is gone, but I'll never, be able to forget it. And I started watching an old video on accident. So, peace out, everybody. 2008 Royal Rumble, 2 thumbs up.